I was asked just over tea and coffee whether I'd ever been heckled. So I don't know if it's a sign of things to come. And actually, I've never been heckled about mindfulness. I was heckled once in church for speaking from a lament psalm, and somebody told me that it wasn't biblical. So that's the only time I've actually been heckled. And just to give you a little bit of my story so you know where I'm coming from, I didn't become a Christian until my early 20s after I'd left university. And I ended up working for Lloyds Bank. And there was a young woman who worked for Lloyds Bank who I thought was very nice. And I asked her out. And she said, "Sean, I would go out with you, but you're not a Christian." And I'd just done an English degree, sort of majoring on the romantic poets. And I thought, is there a higher love than romance? Clearly, the love of God. And there was another guy called Richard who worked in the bank. And he said to me, "Sean, you've got to be really smart here." He was a Christian. He said, "Don't go to her church," because I was still interested. He said, "Come to my church and check it out. And then she won't know that you're gathering some information to help you in this romantic quest of yours." Anyway, I went to his church. He said it was full of young people, and it was. It was a Gold Hill Baptist church. Roy Castle was playing trumpet in the band. They had Graham Kendrick as the guest worship leader. People were speaking in tongues, raising their hands, prophesying. And even worse than that, God was there. I thought, I had been to the odd church. I'm not saying the people in it were odd, but I'd been to a church where there were 3 people, but God wasn't there, so it was much, much nicer, I thought at the time. I thought, I'm never, ever, ever going back. But my heart was strangely warmed, and I did go back, and I became a Christian, got baptized, got married there. They sent me to Spurgeon, so they didn't send me to LST. Because we decided Spurgeon was the place to go. And then I went to Stanmore Baptist Church in 1997. I've been there ever since. And one of our teachers at Spurgeon, I don't know if you know him, was a guy called Nigel Popsey, who was an Anglican vicar, and he did the pastoral care and counselling. And he said something very heretical, which I'm going to share with you. So it's not my heresy, this is his heresy. You can take it up with him. I can give you his email address, mobile phone number, written address if you want to do that, or send him a pigeon, or any of the things that you might want to do. So he said, one of the reasons there's conflict in a church, and you have to think about this, is because the person running the church doesn't know how to relate to people. Now, obviously, that's a heresy, isn't it? The person running the church doesn't know how to relate to people. And I thought, well, I know how to relate to people as a bank manager, because that's what I was. It's quite easy. You just say to people, "And which part of no don't you understand?" And I didn't know how that would go down in churches. In fact, there are sometimes in churches you need to say, "Which part of no don't you understand?" So I decided to do some pastoral care and counselling training, which I did almost as soon as I went to Stanmore Baptist Church. And I did that from 1998 through till 2010. And then in 2006, we're talking about stillness leading to action. I had been active minister for 8 years with no stillness, and I got burnt out. I got very stressed, very anxious, and I literally felt, I don't know if you've ever felt this, I literally felt I was falling apart and I could not hold myself together. It's an incredibly scary experience. Now, fortunately, God's grace, God's timing, I was due a sabbatical, which I took, and I was doing this secular counseling psychotherapy course at Roehampton University, and I came across secular mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is simply our capacity for attention and awareness. So if you listened to that Stuart Townend hymn, full of words of attention and awareness and being mindful and remembering and all of those things. And that, if you like, glued me back together. But at the same time, I came across a little book called The Jesus Prayer by an Anglican bishop called Simon Barrington Ward. And the Jesus Prayer is a very ancient Christian prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. It's the gospel in one sentence. And you say it, the first part on your in-breath, the second part on your out-breath. It's an embodied prayer. And I found that really helpful as well, and I went to see him a few times and learned how to use it myself and teach it. And then, as a good Baptist, I was researching the Jesus Prayer and came across a Greek bishop called Didacus of Photoke, who lived in the 5th century. And he was a pioneer of the Jesus Prayer. And he talked about mindfulness of God. Okay, so secular mindfulness doesn't talk about mindfulness of God. Buddhists don't talk about mindfulness of God. It's a Christian distinctive. And it's a biblical word. Psalm 8. If you're Justin Trudeau, people kind. What are you that God are mindful of you? Mindful in the Hebrew there means to remember. So Christian mindfulness is remembering God. If you look at Deuteronomy and other Psalms, it's full of how forgetful we are. But Christian mindfulness says we are called to remember God. So mindfulness of God is remembering God. It's fixing our attention and awareness on God. So if I say to you, where is your attention and awareness normally, what would you say? Try and be honest, yeah? You're safe. This is not going to be reported back to anyone in your congregation. Well, it might be. I can't vouch for that, actually. Where is your attention normally? Yes, possibly. Actually, out of our awareness, our attention most of the time automatically is focused on our own self. Okay, it's self-focused. We have to learn to shift our attention onto other people's needs. And it's a bit like a rubber band or gravity. It's always pulled back to our own self, our self-focus. But also, the other problem with our attention and awareness is that we're not paying attention. So have any of you ever had the experience of going upstairs to get something? By the time you get to the top of the stairs, you have forgotten what it was you went for. Anyone? No. So, yeah. Nothing wrong with your brain, nothing wrong with your mind. The trouble is you're on autopilot. Okay, so I know people who work Monday to Friday. On Saturday they get up to drive to the supermarket and they find they've driven halfway to work because you're on autopilot. So that's the other thing that we need to recognize with our attention and awareness. We're on autopilot a lot of the time. So maybe a bit later I'll ask one of you to volunteer and I'll slap you around the face. Biblical thing to do, is it not? But what is your automatic reaction? Is your automatic reaction to turn the other cheek? Now be honest. No. Your automatic reaction should be to punch somebody's lights out, shouldn't it, if they slap you around the face? So what Jesus is challenging there is our automatic reactions. And of course, in ministry, we're wounded, our congregations are wounded, and people press our wounds, and we react automatically. And that gets us into trouble. And what Jesus is saying, we need to learn to respond, to slow down, and in the moment, notice what our automatic reaction is and say, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to respond differently in the moment. That's what the ethical challenge, if you like, of Christian mindfulness is. Now, do you believe that the world was created, that nature was created? Yes. Do you believe as a human being that you were, although you are part of nature, you were created? Yeah. So what that means is that the world has a purpose. It was created for a purpose. That you as a human being were created for a purpose. Now God also gave you this amazing capacity for attention and awareness. It was given to you by God. It was created. It has a purpose. So what do you think the purpose is of God giving you attention and awareness? Why would he do that? Life is much easier being on autopilot and mindless, sitting in front of the television, vegetating, eating McDonald's and drinking a glass of wine. Much easier than paying attention. Why would God give you that capacity, do you think? Yes. Okay. So maybe he wants you to be attentive to him. But that is not an automatic thing that we do. I just want to give you 3 verses that are sort of the heart of contemplative theology, just because mindfulness is, if you like, the lost gospel. You might not believe me, but hopefully you'll believe me. at the end. If you do have a Bible, look at Philippians 4, verse 8. And if somebody finds it before I do just read it out, Philippians 4, verse 8. Okay. So that's a lovely verse, isn't it? But actually it has a very serious point, because we don't think about whatever is noble. We don't set our minds on what is lovely automatically. So how many thoughts do you think you have on an average day? I'm not talking about worthwhile thoughts, that's that number. How many thoughts do you think you have on an average day? A lot, yes, about 70,000. How many of those do you think are negative? Negative. So your brain, according to neuroscience, is 3 to 4 times more sensitive to negative information than positive information. So I'm now going to give you 9 compliments about this conference and 1 criticism. I'm not really. Which would you remember? You will remember the criticism. Criticisms stick like Velcro. Okay? Compliments slide out like Teflon. You have to work really hard to hold on to a compliment. What is your negativity bias? And if you like, what neuroscience does is just confirm our theology of the fall. Okay, that distorted way of seeing is built into the very structures of our brain through the fall. We are negatively biased. Now, if I take my glasses off, I can't see you. Imagine that I'm this morning in Stanmore. I sat on my glasses. I walked up to Stanmore to Cafe Nero to console myself, to buy myself a cappuccino. And Mabel, one of my members, waves to me from the other side of the street, and I don't see her. She's straight on her phone. Do you know what? She says to her friend, who happens to be a deacon, "That's Sean. I always thought he was rude." Do you know what he's done? He has just blanked me in public deliberately to humiliate me in front of... You think I'm joking, didn't you? In front of my friend. Now you can get the deacons together and you can shame him in front of the congregation, can't you, with this? Do you see what I mean? We tell these distorted stories all the time, don't we? And part of what I want you to think about over the next 2 days is, what distorted stories do you tell? So when I go home, actually might be home in time for lunch. So imagine I've agreed with Claire to meet her for lunch and I'm 10 minutes late. Now she might say, "Poor Sean, he's stuck in traffic." Or she might say, "Sean is late because he doesn't love me." Now which is true? You see what I mean? We distort things all the time. Most of your problems in churches are not because you've done something wrong. It's because people misperceive what you're doing. They mishear, they misinterpret what you're saying. You might have known that experience. When I first went to Stanmore 21 years ago, there was a lady in the church who said at the church meeting, I wasn't there, she didn't know me, that I mustn't be invited because the Lord had told her I was going to destroy the church. I was going to destroy the church. Anyway, they voted, all except her, for me to come. The church is still there, thankfully. I haven't destroyed it yet. Obviously, we have the capacity to destroy churches. But talking to her husband a few years later, it transpired that he ran his own business and they nearly lost their house. And she blamed the bank manager. And I was the bank manager. So she thought I would come in and be like that. That's called projection. And as a leader, you will be projected on big time by other people. Now, it's nice when they project messianic things on you. That's lovely. Not reality, but it happens until suddenly you disappoint them and then you're the devil incarnate. Jesus had things projected on him, didn't he? By the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. The disciples projected things onto Jesus. They wanted a military Messiah who would drive out the Romans, make them the top of the tree. But he wasn't like that, was he? He was a suffering Messiah. So just two more verses quickly. Colossians 3, 1 to 2. And I think these are pretty central verses. If somebody finds it, would they like to shout it out? Colossians 3, 1 to 2. So basically it's saying, fix your attention on Christ. Not so that you'll be no earthly use, but precisely because you will be of earthly use. And then 2 Corinthians 3 verse 18. Does somebody want to find that and shout that out? Again, hugely central verse. Now I don't know many Christians who actually practice this verse, but 2 Corinthians 3 verse 18. Somebody want to shout that out? Yeah. So other translations say, as we contemplate the Lord's glory, we are transformed. So there it is at the heart. If we want to be transformed, which is at the heart of the Christian faith, we need to contemplate Christ. I think it's a central verse. I don't think we do it very often, and this is where, if you like, mindfulness comes in. So now, if I said to you right now, and this is for free, okay, I'm giving you this away. You don't have to touch the screen and send me £3,000. I could double your lifespan today, and I'll just give you that for free. Now, sometimes people say to me, Sean, no, thank you. Quite happy with my lifespan. Some of you, I could quadruple your lifespan. What do you think? Do you have faith for that, or am I a televangelist trying to con you? What do you think? Okay, who thinks I can double your lifespan? Who doesn't think I can double your lifespan? Okay, right. So the average person, that's us, pays attention to reality, to the present moment in a 16-hour day for 2 hours. Okay? Do you all do about 16-hour days? You're awake for 16 hours, aren't you? Just about. You will pay attention to the present moment, which is reality, for 2 hours. The rest of the time, you will spend in mental time travel. Okay, worrying about something that happened in the past that you cannot change. This might be happening out of your awareness. Or you're worrying about something in the future that you cannot control. Okay, so all of you, looking at you, are aged about 30. So that means you've got another 50 years to live. So that means, of those 50 years, you are spending 6 and a bit years in the present moment, in reality, and 43 and a bit years in mental time travel, not in reality. So if you start paying attention for 4 hours a day, instead of 2 hours a day, I have doubled your lifespan. I have, haven't I? Your real lifespan. Again, if you start paying attention for 8 hours, I have quadrupled your lifespan. That's worth thinking about. How much time, just take a moment and think about it, do you spend in rumination, in mental time travel? Worrying about something you cannot change from the past, ruminating about something in the future you cannot control. Just have a think about that. How much time? Because of your negativity bias, that's why we have that default position. And where attentional training, where mindfulness of God comes in, it enables us to take hold of our attention and direct it where we want, not to where it wants to go. I've got a 17-year-old daughter who's just about to take A-levels in the summer, and a 19-year-old son who's been doing computer science at Bath University. Now, when my daughter does homework, she sits at the dining room table. She's plugged into her phone. She's listening to music. She has her computer there. There are about 3 different little windows of YouTube or other things going on. And she does her homework at the same time. Any of you got children like that, or is it just me? Yeah. Now, the problem is, again, the neuroscientists and other philosophers would say that our attention has been taken captive by the virtual world. And it has been fragmented. And so actually we find it very difficult to sustain our attention. Very difficult to focus our attention. Very difficult to have deep attention. We're easily bored. All these worries. So according to someone, our attention span now is less than that of a goldfish in a goldfish bowl. It's pretty poor. But what we used to have and what Christianity should teach us is deep attention. Paying full attention to people and God and creation. So presence is our first theme, to be fully present. Of course, we're not fully present to people because we're distracted, because our attention has been taken captive, because we're ruminating about things whilst we're trying to listen to somebody, and that we might have heard the same story 93 times. We're a bit bored of it. To be fully present. So when my daughter was little, she would grab my face because she knew I wasn't paying attention. And she would make me look at her directly in the eyes, and then she was confident I was paying attention. So to be present is really, really important. And this is a gospel thing. If you want to look at Mark with me, Mark 3, 13 to 15, if somebody wants to read that out. Mark 3, 13 to 15. I told you this was a gospel thing. Who'd like to read that for me? Brilliant. So a little detail there in verse 14 that is often missed. He appointed 12 that they might be with him, that they might be present with him. And scholars will say that the disciples are with Jesus more in Mark's gospel than in any other gospel. So why is that? It is because we are only transformed when we're in the presence of Jesus. We need to be in the presence of Jesus. So that's, if you like, the first thing, is that if we want to be transformed into his likeness, we need to be with him. We need to be present with him. I remember at college doing a placement in a large Baptist church and working with the minister, and I asked him, how do you pray? He said, I don't pray, I don't have time. I don't pray. I don't have time. I just want you to take a moment. What about you? Has that been squeezed out? And there are different forms of prayer, aren't there? So there are prayers with an S, where we say prayers. And there's prayer without an S, where we're not saying anything, we're listening to God. So one of my favorite verses in the Bible is 1 Thessalonians 5:17, which says, anybody know that? 2 words. Pray continually. Now, how can you do that? How can you intercede 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? You can't, can you? It's attentively listening to God and then interceding, because we can't intercede unless we know. So to be in the presence. And then the other thing I just want to say about Jesus as our model is that he models being fully present to people. So if you want to look at Mark 1 and verse 16, if somebody wants to read that out. Mark 1 verse 16. Yeah, thank you. So in Mark's gospel, which the scholars think is an oral gospel, so what the early church would have done with it is sat there and somebody would have proclaimed the whole of the gospel, and they would have listened to the whole of the gospel. And there are all sorts of words in the Greek that echo and re-echo that you would pick up if you listen to the whole. But In the English translations, they don't like to repeat a word, so they change it. So you miss that actually in the Greek it's the same word. And one of the repeated patterns through Mark is that it says Jesus saw. He saw. And the idea is this word saw carries a lot of weight. It's a prophetic seeing. And people know that they are seen by God when he sees them. So why did they follow him? There's no psychological explanation. Why did they just suddenly follow him? Because they've been seen by God. Now sometimes as ministers, we're not seen as human beings. People think they can say whatever they like to us. I once had a lady in the church who said to me, Sean, there are 40 things wrong with you. Can I have a meeting to talk about them? I said, only 40? Good news, that's great. Let's just start with one. We're not seen, are we? Sometimes. So we need to be seen by God. And God sees you. He sees your potential. He sees what you're trying to do. He sees your heart. He sees as well, he sees that Simon and Andrew will betray him, but he still calls them. They are seen by God. And my prayer is, and we'll have an opportunity hopefully to do that, is that these 2 days you will know that you have been seen by God. Because very often people aren't grateful or thankful for what you do. A lot of what you do is unseen. And that's okay, but God sees it. You are seen by God. And that just repeats. I'll just give you another one. Once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him, and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus. Again, it's repeated. Again, he says, follow me. Levi, tax collector, is seen by God, and that's why he responds. So we need to see people as well, don't we? The people who are not seen by other people. So we have just bought a mobile coffee van. It's not because I like coffee, and I've always wanted my own coffee machine. We have about 600 people who walk past our church. So there's 3 schools and a tube station every morning between 7 and 9:30, and the same coming back in the afternoon. We've just got on the field next door, there's a Hindu school being built, which will have 1,200 students, so we're going to have even more people walking past. So between 7:30 and 9, and then 2 o'clock and 4, we have our mobile coffee van in the car park as people walk past. And this week, we have had a 17-year-old Lithuanian called Paulina, who's only been here 5 months, working with us as a training experience. On Monday evenings for 4 weeks, we've had some unaccompanied minors from Afghanistan who are based in Harrow, lost their parents, so they're 16, 17, doing 4 weeks work placement with us so that they could maybe get a foot on the work ladder, and we've worked on their CVs. These are people who are not being seen necessarily by our culture, maybe feared by our culture. But we're called to see them, aren't we? And that's what Jesus did. He saw people that other people didn't see, the children. Interesting in Mark, he says to his disciples, children are really, really important. So if I was a disciple at that point, I'd have thought, right, next child I see, I'm going to make a huge fuss. And then some children run to Jesus. What did the disciples do? Yeah, go away. How Jesus treated women. Not seen necessarily in their culture, but he sees them and he treats them. Different lepers, touches them. Prays for them. Eyes full of tears for them. So, Jesus is fully present to people, and we need to be fully present to people as well. But as I was saying, that we have problems. And the problem with this virtual world in which we live and our children live, they reckon that the first online generation is 40% less empathic than the one before. Because empathy is only learned face to face. You can't learn empathy in a virtual way. Also resilience. So I don't know about you, in London there's a mental health epidemic amongst young people. Because in the virtual world, you don't learn resilience. It's only face-to-face with real people that you learn resilience. So it's really, really important for us to understand. So we need to learn how to manage this. Now, interestingly, with mindfulness for health, which I look at as well, it can help us with that resilience. It can help us with empathy. And what I want you to think about in a moment, and I'll give you some incentive to do this, is it has to be intentional. So like the Philippians or the Colossians, fix your hearts, fix your minds on things above. You have to have an intention to do it, don't you? Otherwise it doesn't happen. You have to have an intention to pray. You have to have an intention to go to the gym. You have to have an intention to eat well. If we don't have those intentions, nothing happens. Although, of course, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So I want to ask you to think about an intention for practicing being fully attentive and fully present with people, for working on your attention and awareness, cultivating deep attention, full attention with people. So there's a guy in the States, neuroscientist called Andrew Newberg. He's not a Christian, but he likes doing brain imaging studies of Christians. Strange man. He did a brain imaging study of some Franciscan nuns who practiced a sort of Christian meditation for 20 years. What he found was that they intentionally practiced every day. What he found was that the structure and activity of their brain had changed for the better. They were more empathic, more relational, less fearful. And the reason is that God has given you another capacity in your brain called neuroplasticity, which never goes away. So they used to think that, once you hit the age of 21, that was it. It was all downhill from there. But it's not true. That capacity for neuroplasticity stays with us. That means you can change. You can be transformed. So when we actually meditate on God, we're mindful of God, it actually lays down neural pathways in our brain. And it actually smooths away fearful pathways. So I want to just get you to check something. If you put your hand on your forehead, that's your smart brain. So you all have a smart brain. Did you know that? Put your hand on the back of your head. That's your alarm brain. So it's called the amygdala. It's the fight, flight, or freeze stress response. Now, a text message can trigger that stress response. Because once you had an unpleasant text message in the back of your mind, out of your awareness, email, TV, unless it's slow TV, which nobody watches, triggers your stress response. Driving. Anybody experience any road rage on the way? Yeah, much better by train. So we have this trigger, and we live now in such a stressful society. It's a hairline trigger. So do you know what the statistics are for mental ill health in this country? Yeah, terrible, thank you. Yeah, 1 in 4. Ruby Wax, who's suffered from mental ill health and has done a mindfulness MA in Oxford, says, but 4 in 4 people are stressed. Anyone here been stressed? Yeah. Let me tell you a stressful story. It's one of my favorite stories, a true story. So there was a lady called Sarah, worked for the NHS. Staff were being cut. They were being asked to work longer hours. And she got a message on her answer phone from her boss saying, Sarah, can you come and see me at 6:30? And she thought she detected a slight note of criticism in the message. And then she began to think. She thought, well, they are making people redundant. So it's me, isn't it? It's my turn. And we've just extended our house, taken on a bigger mortgage, and we can't pay the mortgage if I don't earn, so we're going to lose the house. And the children have been bullied, we've just got them settled at a new school, they're really happy, they're going to have to move school. I'm going to have to move in with my parents. I hate my parents. Have you ever done that? Do you imagine how she's feeling now? She is tearful, she's angry, and then she starts thinking, I don't know if you ever thought this. After 3 weeks, I bet nobody even remembers that I was there. You ever thought that? Or have you ever thought, I'm going to leave this place, and then they'll really regret being unkind to me. They're really going to feel bad that they made me leave. Do you ever do that? We do that all the time, maybe out of our awareness. Thoughts are incredibly powerful. So I just want you to think of your favorite food right now. Close your eyes, sit up straight, just, as you're already thinking of supper. Your favorite food, whatever it is. I want you to picture it, I want you to smell it, I want you to look at it in your mind's eye. Maybe taste it. Just give you a few seconds to do that. So what did you think of? What was your favorite food? Let me have some. Smoked salmon. Anyone else? Sorry? Pie and mash. Excellent. Indian curry. Did any of you start salivating in your mouth? Did you notice that? Yep. I heard a few tummies rumble. That might have been happening anyway. Might not be evidence about this, but even thinking about food changes us physiologically. A thought, a negative thought, sends stress chemicals running through your body immediately. And it triggers this alarm brain. And what happens when your alarm brain triggers is your smart brain switches off. So have you ever tried to reason with an angry person? You can't. Their alarm brain is triggered, their smart brain is switched off. In that moment, they think they're the smartest person there's ever been in the whole world, and the words that come out of their mouth are the smartest words that have ever been said by anybody in the whole world. And you know that that's not true, don't you? So you have to get them to a calm state of mind before you can talk to them. Now, the trouble with the amygdala, have you ever done this with your child? It's their birthday, you put these candles in, they blow them out, and they light up again. They blow them out, they light up again. It's very cruel. Never do that to grandchildren, children, anything. But that's like your amygdala. That's why you get stressed. That's why you get burnt out. That's why you get anxious. You have to learn to switch it off and switch your smart brain back on. I just want to give you a simple embodied exercise to do that. Because this gospel, Mark's gospel, all the gospels, are embodied gospels. Okay? When Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law, he touches her hand. He touches lepers. It's an embodied gospel. The woman who is bleeding, what does she do? She touches Jesus. It says Jesus knew that power had gone out from him, out from his body. It's an embodied gospel. One day you will have a new body. Okay, we're not Gnostics. This is not the Gnostic heresy, but interestingly, and this is where mindfulness can help us, bring us back to our body, because that's what it does, because that's where your awareness and attention are. A lot of the new ideologies and new orthodoxies are forms of Gnostic heresies. It's your subjective feeling that matters, not your body, not your biological reality. So actually mindfulness can help us say nicely and graciously that actually we live in embodied reality. We need to learn to love our bodies and live in our bodies. Jesus was incarnated in a body to show us how to live in a body. That's really, really, really important. So maybe sit up straight. Make sure your feet firmly on the ground if you can. Put your hand on your tummy, close your eyes. Try and not lean back on the back of the chair. Try and have a straight back, supporting it yourself. And we teach this to children and young people in exam rooms, because they sit in exam, they look at the paper, their alarm brain triggers, their smart brain switches off, and it goes to complete blank. It's called 7-11. It's just focusing on your breathing. So just notice your breathing. It comes in as it goes out. And just see with your hand on your tummy if your tummy is moving. If it's not moving, then you're breathing up in your chest, which is probably a more anxious, worried breathing. So just try and naturally breathe in your tummy. And as you breathe out, just count quite quickly to 7. Don't count slowly or you'll faint. And then as you breathe out, count to 11. Again, it's called 7-11 breathing. It's very good for panic attacks as well. Okay. So what did you notice? Anything you noticed, anything you experienced doing that? Anything you were aware of? Yeah. It switches off your alarm brain and switches your smart brain back on. It relaxes, triggers your relaxation response. So you've got to practice. So I did teach this to somebody once, and then they came back a week later and said, it doesn't work. I said, well, how long did you try it? Well, I tried it once. I tried it for 20 seconds. It didn't work. I'm not doing that again. We have to practice. Anybody else? Anybody notice how tired they were? Yeah. Anybody else notice anything? Yeah, absolutely. So your body is always in the present moment. It can never be in any other part of reality or fantasy. It's always in the present moment. So you come back to your breathing, you come back to the present moment. So what is the theology of the present moment? Well, C.S. Lewis wrote a book called The Screwtape Letters. Anybody read that? Letters of a senior devil to a junior devil. And he said, what God wants us to do as human beings, I mean, he says, what the enemy wants his children to do. He wants them to focus on eternity, and that point in time called the present moment. Because the present moment is the point at which time touches eternity. That's when God meets us, in the present moment. When we're off in the past or off in the future, distracted, it's very hard for God to get our attention. This is that beautiful thing that we did at the beginning. We're inattentive. So that brings us back to the present moment. And what the advice of the senior devil to the junior devil is to distract your human, very interestingly, says C.S. Lewis, into the past or into the future. Then they are no use to God. It's the present moment. That's reality. That's what we have. So that's the theology of the present moment, and we'll come back to that. So that's comes back to this idea of being present. Be present in the present moment with people. And that's difficult. Sometimes we have difficult emotions that we want to avoid. We've got a big funeral at church on Monday. And it's difficult when you know people, isn't it? You know them really well, and you're leading the funeral, and the room is full of emotion. You feel all of that emotion, and you're trying to hold it together. And it's okay to be emotional, absolutely. Like the song we sang, we should actually drench the bodies of those we love with our tears. Absolutely we should. And it's okay as a minister to show that you are deeply moved by the loss of this person that you love and everybody else loves. But often we avoid difficult feelings, and that gets us into trouble. They come back, and they bite us, and they get us. So the present moment, the breath, the body, when we come back to that. So I want to give you another little exercise, which Jesus did a lot of. Anybody been to Israel? Anybody been on the road from sort of Nazareth to Jerusalem in the car? Yeah. Imagine walking that. It's uphill most of the way, and it's desert, and it's unbearably hot. So if you're able to, if you want to, you can do this virtually, but if you're able to stand and just take 3 steps, we're going to do the largest synchronized mindful 3-step walk in the world. And then we'll try and apply for it. So you all stand, if you're able to. Don't worry if you don't want to, or that's difficult for you. Then what I'd love you all to do, and otherwise just do this virtually in your head. So if you can take a little step forward without stepping on anyone, or you're further back, it's difficult. And then turn to your left. Turn to your left. Turn to your left, yep. Okay, so hands down side. I want you to sort of be aware of the soles of your feet on the ground. So you're doing this either in real or virtually, and obviously if you're sitting down you can still try and feel the soles of your feet on the ground. Notice your breathing. Some of you have stopped breathing because you're concentrating so hard. Keep breathing. And then either virtually or actually in reality, I want you to shift your weight onto your left foot and then very slowly take 2 or 3 steps, trying to feel with the soles of your feet what that's like, and then stop without bumping into someone. So you're trying to be mindfully aware as well. And do that virtually in your head. Just picture taking those steps. Fantastic. So have both your feet together. Notice your breathing. Start breathing again. Then what I want you to do is turn around really slowly and just notice how complicated that is as a movement. Just turn around really slowly. Just notice how complicated that is. And then I want you again just to shift your weight on your left foot, and either in reality or virtually, and then again just take 2 or 3 steps, just trying to feel the soles of your feet coming back to your body. And then end up with both feet together, noticing your breathing, and then sitting down in the same seat. This is a mindful awareness test. So what did you notice about that? What did you become aware of? Yeah. I don't know the last time you thought about the soles of your feet. Ignored parts of our body. Yeah. That's incredibly complex to turn around. We do it on autopilot. We walk automatically most of the time. So mindful walking is not just to get to A to B or to exercise. It's trying to inhabit your body and all your senses. And when you do that, and this is the reason for doing it, you find a calm state of mind. Okay? God has given you calm states of mind. You might doubt me, but he has. Mindful states of mind. So mindfulness is not about meditation, which people think it is. It's a capacity that God has given you to be attentive in a way. To find calm states of mind, mindful states of mind, creative states of mind. What the practices do is enhance that. But you have that capacity. You are all mindful people. Of course, you're mindless as well, but that's a human condition. Anybody notice anything else with the mindful walking in reality or virtually? Anything else you noticed? Balance. Brilliant. Absolutely. So what is affecting your balance? What invisible force? Gravity. Okay, so awareness and attention is like gravity. It's always there. It's part of us, given to us by God, but we're not aware of it most of the time. And we need to. So we have what is called a narrative self. We tell stories. Do you all tell stories? Now, a lot of them are distorted, negative stories. And the early contemplative said, any of you ever confessed, been to confession, done a confession? Not particularly Baptist thing to do, but you know about confession. It is a biblical thing. So the early contemplative said that if you've had to confess, it's too late. They said what you have to do is catch the first thought before it becomes a story, before it becomes a temptation that leads you to action. So they, I'll give you a mnemonic if you want to. So they had S stood for suggestive thought. Have you ever had a suggestive thought? You know, that chocolate in the fridge is just suggesting to you that you should go and visit it. Yeah, you know that? Suggestive thought. Then there's a hook thought. Have you ever had a thought that's hooked you in? So that's why they say don't even get to the hook thought and catch the first thought. The hook thought. Do you know what? I just think I'm going to give that person a piece of my mind. It's a very good hook thought, isn't it? You know what? They deserve it. In fact, if I give them a piece of my mind, that's going to sort them out. And their lives will be transformed because I've ripped them to shreds verbally. Do you see what I mean? We do this. Suggestive thought, hook thought. And we might have an internal dialogue. This applies with temptations. I'm taking 3 steps towards the fridge. I'm taking 3 steps away from the fridge. You know what? Temptation, online. All sorts of temptations. And we have this internal dialogue. No. And then fight. You might actually get to the point where you're fighting. So a lot of addictions, people are having this hook thought, then internal dialogue, fight. And then, so you've got suggestive hook, internal dialogue, fight, shift. T is the tale, T-A-L-E, the story of victory or defeat. And then, all the shame and guilt kicks in. They said, if you then have to confess that, it's too late. Catch the first. Because a lot of this happens out of our awareness, so that's why we need to be aware and attentive. We catch the first thoughts. There's an ethical implication for us to be attentive and aware, to catch the first thought, the automatic reaction, the first thing. Don't even go. So you have this narrative self, tell stories, and then you have what's a lot more than 5. Thank you, that's a good answer. What are the traditional 5? Taste, touch, hearing, seeing, smell. Yep. So Daniel Siegel, who's an interpersonal neurobiologist, says we have 8 senses. So you can see if you agree with this. Your 6th sense is that you can tell me something about what's going on in your bodies. So pay attention to your bodies right now. Does anybody have backache? Yeah. Anybody have a slight headache? Anybody feel tired? Yeah. Anybody got aches in any other parts of their bodies? Yeah. So that's your 6th sense. You can tell me something about what's going on in your body. Your 7th sense is that you can tell me something about what you're thinking and feeling. Yeah? Just check your thoughts and your feelings right now. You could tell me something of those if you wanted to, couldn't you? Yeah? And your 8th sense, and this is interesting, I mean, all the senses are relational senses, but your 8th sense is that you can pick up other people's thoughts and feelings, can't you? So we can have they leak. So that's your 8th sense. I would say we have a 9th sense, which is that we can be attuned to the presence of God. Presence of God, which transforms us. But actually, when we genuinely come into the presence of God, every single one of your senses is resonating, is noticing, because God gave you those senses. And your senses, scientifically, are streams of awareness. That's what they are. They're not thinking things, they're awareness. And that's called awe, and reverence, and wonder, and true fear of God. So fear of God is not like seeing a snake. Have you ever seen a snake? Yeah, interestingly, I think with the Olympics, they could solve the drug problem if they just did the 100 meters, and then they just released some king cobras behind them. I think we'd set new world records, wouldn't we? And they wouldn't need drugs to do it. So fear of a snake is not the same as true fear of God. That's when every single one of your senses is saying, I'm in the presence of the one who made me. And the trouble is, with our spirituality, is that we've taught people a disembodied spirituality. They're trying to meet God in some disembodied spiritual realm, not realizing that they meet God in their bodies. And that's really, really important. Now, if you don't believe me, there's a famous professor, let me find him. Alistair McGrath, have you heard of him? Yeah. Alistair McGrath has 800 PhDs. No, he doesn't. He has 2 PhDs. But he says that the spiritual, the transcendent, is accessed through your body. Of course, you have a soul in your body, but it is the soul using all of your God-given senses. And we can transform people's understanding, experience of the presence of God if we teach them embodied spirituality rather than disembodied spirituality. So Mark 9, it says, when the crowd saw Jesus, they ran to him in wonder. Embodied response. They ran to him. Wonder. God touched their emotions. So the Holy Spirit can touch your emotions and transform them. My son was at New Wine and he was just worshipping and he had his eyes closed and his hands out and he felt somebody take his hands really strongly. And he opened his eyes and there was nobody there. Okay, God can do that. And we need to teach an embodied spirituality. We need to model an embodied spirituality. We need to be fully present in our bodies to people. That's really, really important. So just to go back to the mindfulness for health, very quickly, I'll just give you these things. Most of us are stressed. In fact, most people who care for other people are stressed. A common symptom is compassion fatigue. Have you ever had that experience on a Sunday, just sitting down to watch the rugby, have a glass of wine, somebody rings and it comes up, and you think, I just cannot do it. I just have no energy to talk to this person for the next 2 hours. I just cannot do it. Have you ever had that experience? It's called compassion fatigue. So if you were a smart new iPhone, imagine that, what charge would you be on right now? Who's on 100%? So anybody want to be brave and tell me what charge you're on? 20%, thank you, yeah. Now, have you ever been to a conference and left your phone charger behind? Yes. So what is your charger? How do you recharge? Just want you to think about that for a minute. How do you recharge? Or do you recharge? Is it all action and no stillness? Because our doing comes out of being. You need to recharge. So any suggestions for recharging? What do you do? Go for a run. Absolutely. Brilliant way, embodied way, very spiritual thing to do, to go for a run. Recharges your battery. So I had a friend who's a real activist, and I spoke to him about silence and solitude, and apparently it really challenged him. So he tried it, and then he came back. He tried it for a month, came back, and he said, you know what? I sit down in silence and solitude, and I fall asleep. What do I do? I said, well, you like running, don't you? He said, yeah. I said, go running. And in running, he found the stress state of mind disappeared, the calm state of mind came, and he could hear God. Does that make sense? So you're trying to find a calm state of mind. That's when you're most likely to hear God, in the present moment. What else do you do? Ironing, mindful ironing, absolutely, contemplative ironing. And you could do it as an extreme sport. Actually, you could do it at the top of a mountain if you want to. It is an extreme sport, so yeah. No, actually, repetitive tasks. So the early contemplatives, again, would make baskets, because it gave the rational mind something to do, the narrative mind something to do, kept it quiet. And then the still, intuitive part of the brain could come to the fore, and they could listen to God. So the Orthodox Christians use a prayer rope with the Jesus prayer. And every time they say the Jesus prayer, they move on a knot. And the story goes that the first monk who put a prayer rope together, every time he tried to pray, the devil would come down and undo the knots. So an angel came down and said, what you need to do is make each knot 7 crosses. The devil won't touch it. So that's the story. So that's every Jesus prayer now is made. Each knot is 7 crosses. But that's what they do, because it tricks your rational brain, your narrative brain into it's doing something. So anything, knitting, very good thing to do. Anybody else? It's all right, you need to shout. Holidays. Yeah. We didn't get enough holidays, do we? And then, maybe you get 3 weeks. Takes a week to relax. You relax for a week, and then the next week you're sort of getting stressed to get at the thought of going back. So we need to learn how to bring that into every day. And you can bring that sort of taking a holiday every day into your life. So, Jesus said, didn't he? He said, love your neighbor, but hate yourself. Didn't he? Yeah? What did he say? Love your neighbor as yourself. So he knew that we actually have to love ourselves if we're going to love other people. And when they do compassion meditations, and we're going to do one now, self-compassion meditations, what they found was there's a part of the brain that is to do with self-compassion, and that would light up in the brain imaging study. And then a few minutes later, the part of the brain that is compassionate for others also lit up. So Jesus knew. So we're going to do this little exercise. We've got till past, haven't we? You're doing really well. Okay, so let's sit up straight, be attentive, maybe shake your feet about. Again, put your hand on your tummy or on your heart, actually. Let's put it on our hearts as embodied prayer. It's called the Ananias prayer, and we'll talk about why it's called that. And this is, we're going to begin with ourselves. I'm going to say a sentence, pray it out. I want you to pray it in your heart. And then we're going to do some ripples of prayers outwards into the world. And then we're going to come back to our own self. So sometimes when you just can't even pray, this is a really good prayer to do when you're really stressed. So I will pray a sentence, you then pray it in your heart. And we begin by praying for ourselves. May the love of Christ take hold of me. May the light of Christ shine in my heart. May the love of Christ flow through me like a river. Then I want you to picture family, friends, those you love, just one of them or as many as you like, in your mind's eye. Pray this prayer for them. I'll pray it out loud, you pray it in your heart. May the love of Christ take hold of them. May the light of Christ shine in their hearts. May the love of Christ flow through them like a river, right now, in this moment, wherever they are. I want you to picture a stranger, somebody you don't know very well, maybe somebody you just met here for the first time. I'm going to pray this prayer for them. May the love of Christ take hold of them. May the light of Christ shine in their heart. May the love of Christ flow through them like a river. And I want you to picture somebody you don't like very much, doesn't like you, doesn't have to be the most difficult person you know. We're going to pray this prayer for them. May the love of Christ take hold of them. May the light of Christ shine in their hearts. May the love of Christ flow through them like a river. We come back full circle to our own self. So this is a prayer of self-compassion, of compassion for others. May the love of Christ take hold of me. May the light of Christ shine in my heart. May the love of Christ flow through me like a river. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, we pray right now that your loving presence would enfold us. It would flow through us. It would spring up within us. And that as we go into the evening, it would flow out from us one to another. And we would be known and seen. We would know that we are known and seen by God and each other. And in that knowing, we would know what it means to be fully human. And in that knowing, we would be glowing with the glory of God. Lord, we want this, we desire this. We want to be transformed into your glory, into the likeness of your Son. We ask this in his precious name. Amen. Now, as I was, just very quickly, do I point this at you, Ben, or we'll come back to this. It's got, don't know if you've ever seen this. It's a form of Japanese pottery called kintsukuroi, which means repair with gold. And basically they take broken pots and they repair them with gold and silver lacquer. And the idea is that the pot is more beautiful for having been broken and repaired than never been broken at all. Now the truth is that we're all broken. So lots of us don't necessarily know it. So I was broken by ministry in 2006. And God repaired me with the gold and silver of his kingdom. He put me back together. And I am more beautiful for having been broken and repaired than never having been broken at all. And I think this picture is for some of you here. I feel it's a prophetic picture. I just want to give you a moment to look at it. This is you. You are in the process maybe of being repaired with the gold and silver of the kingdom. I don't know if you know a lady called Brené Brown. She's a social researcher. She does shame. And she says the number one myth about vulnerability is that it's weakness. It's not true. To be vulnerable is to be human. To be weak is not failure. It is the human condition. So some of you been told, because you're vulnerable, that you are weak, feeble, and a failure. It's simply not true. We are able to be fully present to people much more who are in difficulties if we ourselves have experienced difficulty, being broken and repaired, being put back together. So maybe that's for you. It's one of my favorite Spencer pictures, Christ in the desert, holding this scorpion. You ever go to a difficult meeting? You ever dread a church meeting? Whenever I have a difficult meeting, I look at this picture. And I say, well, if Christ can hold that scorpion, I can hold this person. I can hold this meeting. And I can do it without fear. Maybe that's for some of you. Because what we need to do is, and what mindfulness of God is all about, is face reality. You know, we accept the reality. This is a difficult person. This is a difficult meeting. We wish it wasn't. But that doesn't get us anywhere, does it? To wish it wasn't. Or that they weren't different. So maybe this is a picture for some of you. This one, let me just try and... a guy called Kurt Jackson, he says, I can just hear the robin above the roar of the stream. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to see if you can spot the robin. People have run out of this rooms like this screaming when they see this picture. Because they never spot the robin. I can just hear the robin above the roar of the stream. And some of you have come in here with very noisy streams going on in your head. So much so that you can't hear the small, still voice of God. But that's all you need to hear, even though the stream doesn't go away. You can just turn down the stream a little bit. That small, still voice of God can sustain you in that difficulty. Sometimes it's ill health. Sometimes it's life-threatening thing we're dealing with, or somebody we love is dealing with, and that just becomes this noisy stream that drowns out everything else. If that's you, God is still in that picture. He is still speaking, and I just pray that that stream will turn down a little bit so that you can hear his voice. And that is enough. Where the Father is, there is everything. It's enough. And finally, this is one of my favorite painters, a French painter, dead now, called Odilon Redon, great name. Suffered from mental ill health. Early pictures are very dark, mainly black. And then he had a spiritual experience and he started painting in these incredible colors. And this is called the mystical boat. And the blue, so you are, I don't know what you think you are or what you've been called by people, or you call yourself. You know, people come and talk to me and say, I'm stupid, I'm useless, I'm a failure, I'm this, I'm that. No, you are a mystical boat. Did you know that? You are a mystical boat on the journey of life, and the blue of the boat represents God's faithfulness to you. He will lead you home, even through the storm. And there are maybe 2, maybe 3 people, a bit like the Trinity picture we saw, at the tiller. And one of those is Jesus. He is at the tiller of the boat with you. And the yellow sail represents the Holy Spirit, the presence of God. And of course the wind is blowing and taking us on this journey. I went to Paris a few years ago with my wife, and for the first time for 50 years they had an Odilon Redon exhibition, and they had one of these mystical boat paintings there, and I just looked at it and looked at it and looked at it, and God spoke to me. But maybe this is for some of you. This is what you are. Made in the image of God, a child of God. So if you want, you can sign in to the internet, look up the picture, keep it with you, contemplate it, and maybe God will speak to you through a picture, through your visual sense. So I'm just going to pray, and the presence of God, being fully present, has been our theme, the stillness out of which we act. And then obviously we're coming to participation, and that's what we're going to talk about. Tracy's going to talk about tomorrow. And I just want to end with this participation sense, going back to Mark 3, verse 14. Jesus, it says, he appointed 12 that they might be with him, be present with him, and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. And obviously elsewhere in the Gospels it gives other things. So basically, the participation is in the ministry of Jesus. That's what we're called to participate in. Now, if your life is anything like mine, 80% of your work is maintenance, not ministry. It's getting electrical installation condition reports done, and writing new data protection policies, lockdown policies. We are called into the ministry of Jesus to do the things that he did. And that's something we need to look at over the next 2 days and say, do I need to recalibrate what I'm doing? Is too much of it maintenance? Do I need to put in more kingdom ministry? Let's pray. Father, I just want to thank you that you gave us bodies, emotions, souls, minds, awareness and attention. You sent your Son to live in a body, to incarnate a body, to show us how to live in a body. And I ask that over the next 2 days, Lord, we will live in the present moment. That we will notice when we are worrying about the past, and we will put it down. We will notice when we are worrying about the future, and we will put it down. And I ask, Lord, that we will find calm and beautiful states of mind in which you can whisper to us. And I ask this in Jesus' name.